what living alone after 60 actually reveals. Most of us grew up believing that a good life is a full one. A house with noise in it, people who need us, a phone that keeps ringing. And yet, when the phone finally does go quiet for a few days in a row, the mind doesn't file that under peaceful. It files it under something is wrong. There is a difference most people never get the chance to notice between the ache of being left behind and something else entirely. Something almost nobody warns us about. A cup sits on the counter. Only one cup. And for the first time in decades, no one is waiting for the other one to be washed. Before we go further, notice honestly whether the picture you just had of being alone is actually true, or just the oldest story you know how to tell yourself. There is a particular moment that happens to almost everyone eventually. Not dramatic, just quiet. Someone spent 40 years being the one everyone else depended on, raising children on very little money, answering every late-night phone call, showing up first and leaving last at every family gathering, every hospital visit, every holiday that needed someone to hold it together, rearranging their own plans around everyone else's without ever once being asked to. For a long time, that was simply who this person was. The one who gives, the one who copes. Then the children built their own lives. Grandchildren arrived. The calls became shorter and further apart, filled with the particular kind of busy that belongs to other people's lives now. For months, this felt like abandonment, like a debt that had quietly gone unpaid. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday, folding laundry that was only ever going to be worn by one person, something shifted. The basket was half the size it used to be. The radio was on, low, more for the sound of a voice in the room than anything being said. And in the middle of folding a towel that had already been folded 1,000 times before, a different thought arrived, uninvited. I gave because I was the kind of person who gives. Not because I was buying something back. Not everyone arrives at this the same way. A retired teacher, living alone for the first time in nearly 50 years, took an old violin down from the top of a closet one afternoon. The case latch was stiff with disuse. Inside, the wood still smelled faintly of resin and time. It had belonged to them since they were 19. The strings were out of tune. Their fingers had gone stiff. They were not trying to become a musician again. There was no one to perform for, no lesson to prepare, no grade to earn. They simply drew the bow across the strings, badly, and kept going. 20 minutes later, they noticed something. The sound had been rough the entire time. It hadn't mattered. For those 20 minutes, there had been nowhere else their mind had wanted to be. There is another kind of weight that tends to show up in a quiet house. Old apologies that were never made. Choices that cannot be undone anymore. The mind loves to pull these out in the silence, one at a time, like stones carried in a bag for 50 years. The stones themselves were rarely the real weight. It was the carrying, the reflex to pick each one back up and turn it over again, one more time, that wears a person down far more than the stone itself ever did. Most of us have tried to deal with this weight by staying busy, filling the hours with errands and television and small tasks that don't really need doing. And for a while it helps. But the errands run out. The television goes quiet. And at some point in the evening, in that particular hour when the light starts to go, the same feeling comes right back, exactly where it was left. Others try the opposite, telling themselves to simply accept it, to make peace with being alone, as if peace were a decision a person could just make on purpose, the way you might decide what to have for dinner. But peace forced into place has a strange habit of not staying. Trying hard to feel fine is still, underneath it, a form of fighting. What actually seems to shift for people has very little to do with filling the day, and very little to do with forcing acceptance of the day. It has to do with noticing something that was already there, underneath all that noise, the whole time. For most of a lifetime, a quiet arrangement runs in the background of almost every day. Other people become the mirror that tells us we are real. A title at work, a role inside a family, a voice that still gets asked for advice. Every one of these is a small mirror. The neighbor who used to wave every morning without fail. The colleague who used to call for advice about nothing in particular, just to hear it confirmed. Most of us never notice how many of these mirrors we are relying on until they start going quiet, one by one. When the last of them goes quiet, it can feel like disappearing. But that feeling is not proof that something has been lost. It is only proof that we had been looking somewhere else this whole time, for something that was never actually sitting there to lose in the first place. There is a simpler kind of noticing underneath all that searching. Not a person keeping watch, just noticing happening on its own. The part that catches the light changing on the wall in the late afternoon. The part that hears the refrigerator hum without ever deciding to listen for it. The part that feels the weight of a cup, warm in one hand. That noticing was never lonely. It never needed an audience to keep working. In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the long discourse describing his final days, the Buddha described his own aging body as an old cart, held together only by leather straps and small repairs. He was not complaining. He was simply naming what was true. Every mirror we have ever built a life around works exactly like that cart. It was never going to hold forever. That was never a flaw in the plan. Most of us have spent years assuming that if the phone stopped ringing, we would somehow stop existing in some real way. See if that assumption is quietly running in you right now, even as you listen to this. That cup on the counter, the one sitting there alone, was never actually proof of what is missing. It is just a cup. There is a specific moment when all of this stops being a theory and starts being something you can actually check for yourself. Tomorrow morning, when the coffee is made and there is only one cup sitting on the counter, try something small. Instead of noticing what is missing, notice the cup itself. The warmth of it in your hands. The steam lifting off the surface. The small, ordinary sound the spoon makes against the side. None of this fixes anything. It simply gives the mind something true to rest on, instead of a story about what should be sitting there instead. There is one more thing almost no one notices until much later. The house may stay quiet tomorrow. The phone may not ring today either. But underneath that quiet, something has been paying attention this entire time, without ever once needing an audience of its own. Not a person keeping watch. Just the noticing itself, doing what it has always done. Perhaps that was the only company that was ever real to begin with. This is not a smaller life. It only looks smaller from the outside, from a life that measured worth by how much noise surrounded it. If something in this found you today, There is more here that goes in exactly this direction, quietly, one video at a time.